Welcome everyone to Glen Cary Lutheran Church as we continue our Wednesday devotions with coffee time with Pastor Kristina. We just made coffee here, brand new fresh cup. It's keeping us alive and awake. This trauma in our culture right now, how are you standing with this? What's it doing to you?
I was just thinking it'd be nice to go back to bed until 2020 is over. Like we just don't know. I feel like it's one thing after another.
It is, this pandemic, and now it's not an accident that the riots have happened during a pandemic. I think the anxiety that we'd all been building up for 2 or 3 now added to this constant call for social justice, that ideally this movement is not going to end soon, that there will be some radical reformation in terms of how we understand who we are as a community of people. I want to read for you. Normally, to do our devotions, we would play A Mighty Fortress Is Our God, the theme music. Somehow, I keep asking Kristina to bring her kazoo to play it, and she keeps saying, I forgot it. So we're not going to do the kazoo thing, but today, here's what I want to do today with this theme song, A Mighty Fortress. I'm going to just read for you Luther's writings from around 1520, in which he writes really words that seem relevant for us today. Verse 3 of A Mighty Fortress Is Our God. Though hordes of devils fill the land, all threatening to devour us, we tremble not, unmoved we stand, they cannot overpower us. This world's prince may rage, in fierce war engage. He is doomed to fail. God's judgment must prevail. One little word subdues him. We are going to be exploring the book of Job now for the next 5 weeks. And the book of Job really, you can hear in this verse of A Mighty Fortress, you can hear in the book of Job the battle that we're all engaged with. I know there are folks on one side and the other who, without question, believe that they are right. And they believe that their cause is a righteous cause. The question is always, every Christian knows that the lens by which we view our ethics is not just the golden rule, but the building off of what that means. Love your neighbor as you love yourself. Do unto others as you want them to do to you. Do you want someone putting you on the ground and stepping on your neck and saying, I have no compassion for you? Of course you don't want that. Nobody wants that to happen to them. Would it be that we take that commandment in every aspect of our life and see that as the lens? What does it mean to really love your neighbor?
I think it's a good segue into our next sermon series on the book of Job, where the key question of this book, which is honestly why so many people don't like reading Job, the key question is, why do the innocent suffer? So what do you think? Why do innocent people suffer?
If a person has within their heart the desire to get ahead, to climb the ladder of success, if all of that is somehow there and other people who are vulnerable are simply a stepping stool for me to get higher, that's why what Luther is trying to address in this is the powers of the government around him that are running the show, that are dictating most of this. And so that's part of it, is a complete lack of understanding that in order for me to win, the toll it takes on your spirit, your life, the love of God, God's commands for us to just step on somebody to get ahead without recognizing they are my brother or sister. So I think, what are your thoughts about it?
Well, I think, like you say, human sin is one of the big reasons. People suffer because we hurt each other, right? We have, whether we like it or not, we have prejudices inside of us that cause us to treat other people poorly. And I think there are forces of evil much larger than we understand. that infect us whether or not we know it. And I think racism is one of those things where it is just so a part of the fabric of our society that whether we admit it or not, it's there. So I would say for sure evil, human sin, but some suffering just seems very random. Natural disasters, disease, and I don't think the book of Job really gives an answer to this question of why.
Yeah, in fact, it sets it up so that it's said from the very beginning that Job is a blameless man. But we would even ask in this day and age, is he blameless? Is there something systematic in the system that allows him to gain such great wealth at the expense of others? There's others in Job's time who are suffering from racial differences, from poverty. There's got to be something within that system that created it so that Job could amass such wealth that this isn't in the story of Job, but I'm inserting it in it. Maybe there's a place within the story of Job where it says he's blameless. A lot of us who feel like we're good, moral, kind people to our people around us, our neighbors, are not willing to acknowledge, I am still a part of this. I have white privilege. I am part of this system. One of the things you pointed out earlier, which is really helpful, is our worship service this summer. Since this pandemic set in, our ones that we've been doing over the internet. We began every worship with a brief order for confession and forgiveness. And it's right, we have said over and over again that I am by nature sinful and unclean. Or what are the exact words we use that?
If we say we do not sin, we deceive ourselves, and the truth is not in us.
But if we confess our sins, God who is faithful and just, which comes from the Gospel of John. The Lutheran Church didn't make that up. It's straight out of the book of John, the Gospel of John. Well, let's get into this and read this now. Let's read the book of Job, chapter 1. I'm going to highlight it and skim it a little bit because it's a little long. But I want you to get the foundations of where this conversation starts. Job, chapter 1. There was a man in the land of Uz. His name was Job. He was blameless and upright, and one who feared God and turned away from evil. He had 7 sons, 3 daughters. He had 7,000 sheep. He had a whole bunch of stuff, many servants. His sons used to go and hold a feast in the house of each of his days. And when the day of the feast had run their course, Job would send and sacrifice them, and he would rise early in the morning and offer burnt offerings according to the numbers of all. And for Job said, it may be that my sons have sinned and cursed God in their hearts. Thus Job did continually. Now there was a day when the sons of God came and presented themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came among them. And the Lord said to Satan, where did you come from? And Satan answered, well, from going to and fro to the earth, and from walking upon it and down upon it. And the Lord said to Satan, have you considered my servant Job, that there is none like him on the earth, a blameless and upright man who feared God and turns away from evil? Then Satan answered the Lord, does Job fear God for naught, for no reason? Hast thou now put a hedge upon him and his house, and all that he has on every side? Thou hast blessed the works of his hand, and his possessions have increased in the lands. But put forth thy hand now, and touch all that he has, and it will be cursed. And the Lord said to Satan, behold, all that he has is in your power. Only upon myself do not put forth your hand. So Satan went forth from the presence of the Lord. And then what happens next is horrible things happen to all that he has. His children, many of them die. And so bad things now start to happen to this good man who is faithful. And it ends chapter 1 this way. Your sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine with their eldest brother's house, and behold, a great wind came and struck the 4 corners of the house, and it fell upon the young people, and they were dead. And I alone have escaped to tell you. Then Job arose, and he tore his clothing, and he shaved his head, and he fell upon the ground and worshipped. And he said, naked I came before my mother's womb, and naked shall I return. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. And all this Job did not sin, or charge God with wrong. So what are you going to say on Sunday about that? I think we should lay out a little bit of the story of Job, about its context.
Yeah, I think one of the most valuable things I've learned about Job is that, what is the genre of the book? It starts off kind of like a fairy tale. Once upon a time, there was this man named Job who lived in this place called Uz, which is like, no one can find where it is. It's not even like a real place. So you'll notice that it's kind of like a parable. It's kind of like a fairy tale. It's not like a historical account like some of the other Old Testament books. And I think this is really important because when you read this introduction where God and Satan kind of make a wager about Job's life, like, do this and I bet he'll curse you, that's not how God operates. This is setting up a hypothetical scenario which introduces the topic of suffering.
Yeah, Satan in this plays into a whole different genre of understanding evil as well. In the traditional language from Genesis on into the Gospel of Mark, which recently we unpacked about the powers of good and evil, this Satan in this falls in the language of somebody who may have been a good angel in the courts of God who fell from his goodness, and now there's this battle going on. And so it's playful. Satan here is not the Satan you see elsewhere. It's clearly is a parable. It's a metaphor for us. So don't get yourself caught into, well, God doesn't act that way, and Satan is having too much fun or whatever. It's intentionally written as almost like the book of Jonah, which people misunderstand a lot. The book of Jonah is with the fish and the whale and all that stuff. It's meant as Jewish humor. This falls in almost there's some humor to it, but the humor of the situation really tries to go at really big themes. So going back to the question, why do people suffer? It's not simply because Satan does something. We participate in that. I don't know. What do you think?
It kind of reminds me of like God and Satan walk into a bar, and then this happens. All of a sudden, Job's lost everything he has. And I think it kind of begs the question, maybe not just for us who have a significant amount of comfort and wealth and privilege, but what happens if all that is gone? Like, that's what I keep thinking of is, do we love God because God blesses us with the stuff we have in our lives? And like Job in this first chapter, he loses everything, and the first thing he does is worship. I don't think I would do that, honestly.
One of the things I really love about this, because I find it so deeply with the human spirit, is that what the book of Job does, I think the deepest human sin that we have is this desiring temptation to put God on our side without any reflection upon the ethical choices that are being made, right? So we want God on our side when somebody dies. Well, of course, God, rarely do I hear anybody ever get up at a funeral and talk about the bad parts of Uncle Bob. Aunt Tootie, nobody does that. And there's something within the human heart, and you can see it in the political world right now. I don't hold up a Bible because I have a political agenda, and I want you to vote for me the next time around. I hold up a Bible as a pastor because there is a word in this that confronts me, says change the way you understand who you are. God's in charge. I'm not in charge, even though, it's the oldest sin from Genesis, is the desire to be God, going back to the Garden of Eden. I want to have the knowledge of all things good and evil. Well, that's not your job. Your job is to line your own life up with the Word of God and this commandment to love your neighbor. Now, you got to figure that out. In order to love my neighbor, I've got to stop making everything be about my wants, my wishes, my nationality, my group, my club. Somehow I have to get outside of that and see it from a different perspective. So,
Well, and just the reminder that God cares for all creation. And I think that is something we learn later in this book when God turns to Job, who's being kind of mouthy, kind of like you said, insisting on his own way. And God says, well, were you there when I created the world? And Job's like, no, I'm not God. And he has that stark realization that the world and God are so much bigger than he can possibly understand.
All right, so we have a fun ride ahead for us the next 5 weeks. We're going to invite you all to make sure you come to Glen Cary this Sunday. Gather in our parking lot. We will have communion. We'll hear more about the book of Job. We'll explore more of the human heart through the life of the book of Job. And this will be a fascinating series for you. Encourage you to sit down and read it. It's not a short read. It's 42 chapters. But there's things in there that will make the hair on the back of your neck sit up and think about yourself.
Yeah, I also posted an overview video on our Facebook page that is actually really helpful, going through the particulars of the story.
Fabulous. Until Sunday, when we see you again, Pastor Kristina, Pastor Gary from Glen Cary Lutheran Church. Hope to see you this Sunday. Take care.